Okay, I'd like to call to order our city council work session for Monday, April 1st, 2024 at 6:01. Tonight, we have a couple items. We have a facilities master plan update. Assistant to City Manager Isaac Buttman will be the lead, and why don't you introduce our guest?
Thank you for having us here tonight. With me are Brandon Dole and Eddie Rivas. They're our consultants for the master plan. They're going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing and what this master plan is and what it isn't, to help you understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, where we're at. And hopefully there might be a little bit of time if you have questions after. With that, since we're in time crunch, I'm going to hand it over to Brandon.
Sure. Yep. Thank you, Isaac. Thanks for the introduction. Mayor, council, staff, good to see everybody here tonight. Question was about 30 minutes. I'm going to probably cut it a little short of that, give you some time back. So you can always do this if you want me to go a little faster as well. But tonight we put a small slide deck for you and really want to keep this as a conversation discussion. Clarify we're not asking for any decisions or really a lot of input. We would like it and welcome it, but it's more give you an idea of where we're at and kind of more information for you. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about intro project background, give you a little bit of our look and what we're doing. We're going to talk about the process, what we've done thus far to date. We're going to talk a little bit about the existing facilities, what we've done with them, the dive that we actually completed. Talk a little bit about programming, what that means, the sessions we did, the rolling up of the sleeves, if you will, of the project team and kind of diving in. Talk next steps, schedule, and then hopefully allow for some Q&A at the end. Unless you have some initial questions you want me to start, I will just keep going.
I'm good.
You're good. Okay. Thank you, Mayor. All right. So what have we been doing? This is the list, and it's brief, but there has been a lot. So we kicked it off with the first phase, really talking about research and on-site assessments. That's us getting out into the buildings. That's us getting to know the city staff. We call that a day in the life at times, where we come out, become a fly on the wall, really watch how they operate, how they use the facilities. So we kicked off in November, started that process, and really dove into City Hall building. This facility we're sitting in, which is three buckets in our mind: the City Hall admin, the police, and then court, music court. We dove into the community development department. Obviously, everyone's aware that they rent space a few blocks away. And then we went down and spent some time with Dave and his crew in the public works facility. One thing to note there that we as a group, our scope focused solely on operations, nothing to do with the treatment facility. That's completely outside of this. And then we did get a nickel tour of the middle school. So there was some initial questions, some tasks for us to go, take a look at that facility, and we did that. From there, we went into programming. And so programming as us, way I would summarize it is really right sizing the facilities, right? So trying to determine what is the right size, what's the best approach for the city of Scappoose and community. And we did that through multiple sessions. We did a lot of staff engagement. Eddie here actually was kind of the boots on the ground, if you will. He was combing through all the spaces, getting all the tours with city staff, getting conversations with different crew members, and getting a lot of that engagement. We did a handful of programming sessions as a team. We really tried to establish what were the ideal city facilities. When you look at each department, what is ideal for them, right? If we didn't have budgets, we didn't have schedules, we didn't have all these other constraints that we know are out there, what is ideal, right? Kind of a blend between the wants and the needs, right? We always look through a lens of what is the role, what's the position, what are the duties. But then we know we have some staff members that have been here for maybe decades, that have been here for their entire career, and they have a lot of value and insights, and they have sometimes those wants. So we try to incorporate that. So we go through the ideal facilities. We looked at other precedent sites. Scappoose is interesting in terms of its size, a population of 8,000. So we tried to find another community that was the apples to apples, and I feel like we did that. The city of Gladstone was a precedent. They're at about a population of 9,000. Currently doing a lot of work with them as well. So that was our apples to apples. If we talked about kind of the future, the growth, the potential, trying to figure out what does that look like, we've been looking at communities in the 30,000 range, which that is a big lift and maybe a big ask for the city of Scappoose, but trying to find something as a target. And so Oregon City is a great example. So looking at different facilities and the way they approach planning, recent developments, capital improvement projects. And then we have facility tours. So that's actually coming up the end of this month. Project team is going to go look at a few of these precedent studies, hear from city staff, project team members that were involved, and really kind of understand the task at hand when we talk about doing capital and development projects at a certain scale. Right? Big lifts, there's a lot of time and process involved, ultimately a lot of faith that goes into that. So being able to show you, here's right size examples, talk to these people, walk through and hear the challenges, if you will, I think it's beneficial. So we're doing that at the end of this month. We also did a sustainability and resiliency charrette. We came in and asked some heavy questions. Does the city have a resiliency plan? How do you do emergency operations? What are your highest priorities? The event we get a major seismic event, and talked about what does it mean to have resiliency top of sustainability. A lot of that stuff is codified depending on the groups, the building types, the work that would be done in the buildings. Some of it is personal subjective thing where like you want to go above and beyond code minimum, good messaging, stewards of public dollars, those types of things. So try to at least have a baseline, an initial conversation about resiliency. All of that work since November really boils down to a space program document that is an Excel file that goes through and quantifies every role, their position, how big their space needs to be, program performances such as like council chambers. We need the ability to project. We need the ability to have a dais that's safe and secure. Those types of requirements for each of the spaces, and go through and quantify the entire city department. We look at storage needs. We look at different common spaces, different amenities, things that aren't necessarily a position, a staff, if you will, but things that you need to actually develop a city hall, maybe a new police station, new operations, admin buildings, those types of things. We develop a document. That in there, the draft form currently, and in terms of where we're at today, city staff, project teams are actually reviewing that document, making sure what we've brought to the table in terms of best practices, industry standards, what we feel is right size for the city of Scappoose, making sure they agree and we can all kind of come back together and say, yeah, this is what we would like to present to you all. That is what we've been doing since November. Next steps is, and actually we're doing those now, is drafting the final deliverable, master plan itself. The nice read, the document that you can use and pass around, the document that you can shop, kind of show the result of the work, right? The actual deliverable product. That master plan, one thing we keep echoing, and I'd like for all of you, at least the major takeaway, is we've been talking as a group about projecting 20 years down the line. But you really would come back and as a community reevaluate the plan every 3 to 5. The crystal ball is cracked and cloudy, if you will. Any questions on that? Thoughts? So existing facilities, where we started with this building. And again, did the day in the life. We came through and tried to quantify everything. You can see here that the text isn't really intended for us to go through. I'm not going to do that, but you can see that we walked through and identified all the major spaces that were dedicated to police department, police functions, inside and out the building. Did the same thing with admin staff, council chambers, and parking for city hall and the admin functions here. And then we also went over and looked at community developments, Lori's, they're quantified what they have, understanding that you're a tenant in this building. And so just trying to keep that in mind, right? And then also looked at some parking requirements for that facility. Did the same thing with Public Works. And again, we really just, with Dave, kind of tried to draw that line in the sand of what is operations versus treatment facility, knowing the city already has projects and plans in way. So we looked at the admin building, what do they use and have in terms of office spaces, parking obviously for their crew staff plus fleet vehicles. They do maintain some of the fleet vehicles and equipment. So looked at what do they have in terms of a shop, what functions in those buildings and spaces are overlapping kind of on top of each other, trying to break things apart. And again, with operations, there's a lot of demand on the site. a lot of bulk material storage, a lot of large of equipment that requires circulation. So try to identify, hey, what are the big parts and pieces being utilized now by operations that we definitely have to have a plan for in the future, and then maybe also build on, bring in other amenities down the. And from there, we did program facility. So after our group, Eddie and I felt like we got to know the department, some of the staff, got to hear some of the soft conversations. Then we really wanted to get the team together, focus in on what is the right size and what are the key amenities, what are the key pieces. So we went through each department. You can see here in we use what's called a Miro. It's an online whiteboard where we can have infinite space to make notes and comments. And so pasted in images of the precedent studies. You can see the images below here in the city of Gladstone, their civic center project we completed about 2 years ago and are in phase 2 of now. But looked at, here are kind of the key pieces and parts. Here's how they married two city departments together to maximize the space and land that they had available. So we went through each department and said, hey, what are the key public spaces? What are the key service core? And it said every building has mechanical spaces, of that nature. We also identified what's key to City Hall with respect to municipal chambers, community development, and also what's a requirement of the site. There are different parts and pieces we need to make sure that are accommodated. So in all of the programming, we really try to answer these three questions. What are ideal facilities? What are other cities of this size doing? And then how do we make sure that it's right for the size for the city's capital? Questions on that? What does that look like? What's Miro?
Go ahead, Ken.
I just want to say that particular page, it was, I couldn't read, no, not that one, the one that you're just getting to. I couldn't read at all. So you can really tell us exactly what that is, or if there's somewhere that we can get a better copy.
Yes, yeah, the copy will be coming. I purposefully did that so that you didn't focus on any of the granular stuff. Not fair. And Isaac pointed that out, like, hey, they're gonna ask these questions, but there is a little method to the madness. So what I really wanted you to focus on was just the text in the upper right hand corner, right? Programming sessions. There was a lot of time dedicated to that. We met multiple times. We went through all the precedent studies, did a lot of diagramming. How do the buildings and departments work together to create a culture, create an identity for each department, something that you can package and actually execute down the line, right? Like there's no sense in planning Taj Mahal when we're never going to be able to build it. Okay, so how do we make it right size and actually give you parts and pieces that you can execute, build momentum? So,
I have a question then, if you.
yes, sir.
Like typically, are police departments with the city hall? Is this pretty common?
It
Are
is.
there options where are there police with the fire department? Are they ever together? Is Public Works typically where their wastewater treatment facility is and where all the equipment is? Or are their offices sometimes
Yeah, no,
with development and city hall?
great questions, all of those. So we are seeing variations amongst all of them right now. So right now I have clients, different municipalities, jurisdictions where council chambers and police are in one facility. You create a common space between the two so that you can provide all the security and separations. We're master planning for a city that they're combining their police headquarters, their public works operations facility. In terms of emergency preparedness, community disaster awareness, those two groups often function a lot alike. So we're starting to see, interest in pairing them together, if you will. Public Works is always different because every city's set up different and the infrastructure is a little different. Requirements. Normally treatment is off on its own. They have satellite facilities so that they have different bins and parts and tools everywhere, but one operations facility. So you're pretty close. I mean, if you think about this building having admin, council chambers, and PD, really close. It's just maybe it's not right sized. It's grown and morphed into something that's organic. And then also it's deferred maintenance and doesn't meet. So you're almost there on all of these facilities. The question that we really are starting to try to figure out now that we're right sized is how do you resolve Public Works given that that is a waste treatment facility? So you can probably imagine where we're going to start pointing, right? Like you need to find room for them. And then community development, right? You couldn't just move community development into this building. Obviously, we're already kind of at our seams here. Is it right to go up, spread out? Right? So we're thinking about it, right? You're close. That's why we're going to go take the group to show them a couple different examples, right? In Gladstone, we've got police, municipal court council chambers, and then city admin staff. And you have a similar situation in Oregon City. We have operations facilities that are standalone, and we have some that are campus-like. So between Wilsonville, Oregon City, and Gladstone, we're going to show you a mix of how that gets executed and what it looks like.
Thank you.
There are lots of opinions on how those groups go together and how they function. Is why we like diving in and getting to know the groups. So the results. So we've gone through, we've quantified each staff position, current and future. I'm really asked the staff to kind of think outside the box. Hey, I know you have a person who is a rock star and they probably wear 5 hats. That is not ideal, right? So what is ideal? We start breaking those roles and positions apart. We quantify the spaces. How big is a director's office, right? What are the roles and functions that the director is doing? What are the requirements of that space, and how do we give you that box? Size, performance, site requirements for each department, parking, and obviously storage. Big heavy lift on figuring out public works storage. They have, nuts and bolts to big pieces of equipment. How do you make sure all that works together in a safe manner? This document here really does that. And so purposefully, you could see lots of lines, lots of text, lots of numbers, because there are a lot of spaces, right? You're talking 70 some thousand square feet required building office space. Right? So a lot goes into it. So right now, the homework for staff is to go through that with the best ability and say, yeah, I think this is right. I think these are the amount of people I would like to have in 5, 10 years, given projected growth. These are the roles and functions we're kind of overlapping, maybe doing double duty on, and we need to separate those. All of that's built into this.
You're doing an org assessment as well?
Say that again.
You're doing an organizational assessment? Like a little bit of.
No, I mean, no, we're not looking at how you operate in terms of, you may need to have a finance department, or you may need to have like an economic development director. Not in that sense. We're taking who you are right now, right sizing to that. There's not a lot of projected growth in the city of Scappoose. If you look at consensus, some of the collection information, like Portland State University has a big research facility. We use them a lot. In our world, if we're less than 1% projected growth, we're just applying standard. If we see projected growth above 1%, then we really look at that, and that becomes a focus. Scappoose is less than 1%. I did want to talk a little bit about resiliency and sustainability. We have a big push in the design community to focus on that. We understand a lot of global climate, a lot of global warming and changes in our climate are affected by the construction industry. So Scott Edwards Architecture takes it upon ourselves just to cookbook a lot of that into the process with our clients. But in terms of master planning, facility planning at this level, we really want to try to understand, does the city have a baseline for the way that they think there's a resiliency and sustainability? And we got a lot of good information out of staff, but there isn't a document or there isn't a plan set aside that says, hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it in the event. So we brought some awareness. We brought in our sustainability director, talked about how do you treat a public works facility versus a police station versus a city hall? What does it mean to go out and ask a community, hey, how do you plan for the big one? How do we build in redundancy? Here, well, redundancy means you're building 2 of everything. Truth in that, so we want to make sure that in terms of facility planning, that's built in and you have a baseline to go. So in the presentation, I just put a couple questions that we were asking of the group and we're helping define for the city. Things for you to be aware of, things for you to think of, and maybe put that in. So in terms of resilience, a project that has the ability to resist, absorb, accommodate, and recover from the effects of a hazard, timely and effective manner, right? So how resilient is the building? When we talk about a police station, fire station, hospital, those are all codified to the extent possible, right? We can never guarantee, but we can try to ensure that certain facilities can be built and designed to standards that much as we can design to, you can have a building that you can turn the lights back on, the toilets can operate, walk right back into and start operating. You can design facilities to where in the big event, someone can walk out of the building and the time that alarms and the ground starts moving, but the building is not salvaged. Preservation of life. So the city hall codified that it's any other normal office building. So you start asking the community, well, the city hall is very important. That have different amenities and parts and pieces that support emergency operations. Do you need to go above and beyond a code minimum? Police station already has that codified, right? They're held to certain standards. So that's already in the works is one that you have ability to volunteer to do more. So inclined as a community. But resiliency is again, how much of the building do you want to be serviceable, livable, and fully functional? These industries have. Resilient thinking, something we just thought we'd leave behind. This is a definition from the American Institute of Architecture. The foresight to see how changes might affect the built environment, respond with designs that accommodate or recover the effects of a hazard event in a timely and effective manner. They always have to be foresight and thinking. In our region, in our area, we talk about seismic events, but you were in our charrette and you heard what Juliet was saying. There is a list of over a dozen things in terms of emergency preparedness and awareness we try to bring. Some things in terms of planning at this point in the stage, we're at a 300-foot level in terms of planning. Things that we want you to be considering is, what are the key performance goals that need to be prioritized within facilities? So when we talk about building service life, how long are you going to design a building for? If you were to build a new city hall, are you building it for 50 years, for 150 years, or for 5 years? Duration of livability, passive survivability. So if we had a major seismic event and everything went down, how long would you want your emergency operations center to be operational? Does it survive within hours of the event, or is it surviving days? Critical systems and infrastructure, so emergency lighting, elevators, the EOC. We also try to coin a term called Incident Operations Center, so flexibility with which and standards in which you design towards. Talk about energy efficiency. Oregon Energy Code requires a certain amount of that to be just cooked in as a public project. We are looking at guidelines like 2030 challenges. How do we go a little bit beyond the code minimums? In the state of Oregon, that code minimum is 1.5%. Whatever you're building to build the building, you need to add 1.5% to it just to dedicate to 9 times out of 10 solar voltaic. Any questions on this? Thoughts on it? Here's some more information on just resiliency. What are the different design strategies? Adaptability, flexibility, durability, passive design, redundancy. All of these questions and lenses that you use in designing a facility all come into play when we talk about resiliency. Next steps. Got about a month. That's where we draw the line in the sand. We said we want to get to the end of April. Gives our team and Isaac a little bit of wiggle room in case we need it. Well, right now we're asking project team, city staff to review the space program document, right? Make sure our quantifying is right. We're currently producing our final deliverable, the draft, right? The pretty document that's going to have lots of photographs. Something that you can showcase. All of that is coming together over the next 4 weeks. The idea is that we produce a draft, staff, project team, all get big thumbs up, and then we bring it back to you, share it with you, and then open it up for comment, opinion, where we do the rubber final stamp.
And then do we vote on it and accept the facilities master plan?
Typically, you vote to adopt it.
Yeah.
As something that you want to carry forward. We're giving some leeway, a month and a half approximately. To allow for conversation to be had if you need that. We're trying to close out before the end of this week.
That's fair.
Yes, Council President.
So I don't want to make an assumption here. So will the design include an EOC? Or if we are isolated from I mean, the county has an EOC, but if we encounter an event where we are isolated,
We do have in the program spaces that would function as a IOC, EOC. We're not labeling it, hey, you're gonna build an EOC. You're gonna have parts and pieces where you can function like that. And one thing you said, I just want to make sure we clarify, um, we're not designing anything, right? We're providing a basis for the designs to happen.
got it. Yeah, and I mean more like a multi-purpose room that can
Yeah.
function as an EOC or whatever you want to call it in the event that we are isolated and we can serve our community if that were to happen.
Yeah, that is all built in there. There's spaces like that in accommodations in Public Works and in the police side.
Great, thank
What
you.
we want to really get to over the next 4 weeks after staff has said, yeah, this feels right, is how do we place those blocks and those programmatic pieces on this property on Public Works to say, hey, here's how it does or doesn't fit. Here's some ideas on how you can move forward. Here's projects or questions you need to move forward down the line.
Yes.
So question is, are you, and I don't want to assume either, are you going to be putting cost to this depending on the type of performance that way? Because you said, well, are you building something for 5 years, 50, 150? So
It's really hard to
on
put,
that?
it's a great question. We anticipated each one of these. It's really hard to put a cost to something you don't have a design. Right? So we know that these facilities have certain costs. We're gonna project and give you a order of magnitude, right? So we're gonna give you cost per square foot. Hey, we're seeing based on what we're building today, yesterday, what we project in 3 years, this type of building is X amount of dollars, a range, $700 to $900 a square foot. So then all of us could real quickly do some calculations, say, hey, if I'm building 25,000 square feet at $1,000 a square foot, get a rough order. The thing that it wouldn't have in there, some costs that every development has is the soft costs. What is design? What are permitting? What are your costs, to actually build a project? Those we wouldn't be in here, and we can advise staff on percentages to apply and sling out some of those numbers.
And then, I mean, if you get to that part, you hire a company to come in and design and kind of tell them what you're looking for and what you would like, and
Exactly.
you guys do
Yeah.
that as well.
Say we come back and say, the waste treatment facility won't accommodate a full blown operations facility. Might accommodate this, but not the whole thing. So the charge then the next steps would be, a city, do we want to start developing a project to start identifying our public works? You don't hold the land necessary to place them on day one, then you need to go find them. That's the next project. So a lot of times we find these master plans really identify next steps in terms of projects. Go do this, right? But it takes a lot of questions outside this room, a lot of questions in the community. What's the trajectory?
This says you need this many square feet, get the development in here. We can then look at this building and get a quote, can we add on, can we grow, or
We're going to provide some suggestions, with what we see with this building. Here's what we would suggest as the highest and best use of this, how we would move it forward. And what does that leave left on the table to then have to go figure out? And you'll have a roadmap of the spaces, sizes needed, and then like give somebody a consultant group and say, hey, please go help me find this or figure out how I get this project started now. These are big lifts. We know this. They really are. I had the pleasure of working with the city of Oregon City on an operations facility, and I started working with them in 2014, and we opened the facility into 2020. Their public works director had been working. So it's a big lift for these sizes of communities. We understand that, but you have to have a map that you kind of come back and do that. We're almost there.
For the next steps, can you give us an idea of what the different phases would be and approximately what the what the cost would be? Like the design phase, I know those are pretty expensive as well.
And in terms of cost, I really don't know how to answer that because we would be coming back and asking you all, hey, what's the next project? Right? Knowing now what the document says and where where you would be in 5, 10, 15 years, what are those key things you want to focus What's the interest here? What are you hearing out in the community? Hey, we really need to resolve PD. Right? PD is hurting. They're on top of each other. We have safety, security, blah, blah, blah. Sorry. City staff, figure out how we go down the path to get to a new police headquarters. Rework it. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm just trying to get an idea. I know there's different scenarios, but I was trying to get an idea of how much, be mindful of what our challenges financially could be in the, coming future.
So if it helps, you know, if you look at project planning, say, hey, I have $10 million to spend on a project. Usually 25 to 30% of that goes to soft costs. Permitting, staff's time, consultant costs, the rest of it goes to construction. If you say, hey, someone comes and tells you, you need to build a $10 million fire station, multiplier is 1.3. And everyone will have a little different, the numbers get a little long. Yeah, sir.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. And then you'll get us a date on the facility tour?
The 24th. One thing that we don't have out, Mayor Buckus, is the agenda, the stopping points for each day.
Okay.
That is forthcoming.
Thank you. Thank you. Get to another, I've met with them online. But we're gonna jump right into council rules. If you guys gotta get up and get something, you can. Isaac is gonna handle this one as well. I'd like to get as much done in 30 minutes we can, knowing that this probably won't even be half, or we won't be able to get it finalized, but we'll get us going. It will get us, ask some questions, and we'll do this again as much as it takes, but let's see what we can get done in the next 25 minutes. So council rules, draft changes, Assistant City Manager Isaac Buttman, if you'd like to take it away.
Right. So I'm going to start off with a couple of very specific questions and then kind of open it up. Reason I'm starting with the questions is that those are two items that, one, I've heard of from a few counselors. I want to make sure gets addressed. Two is an item that kind of started out why we're back here in a work session. So the first one is a question about the agendas, why they get closed, who's able to open them and remove things. Yes. Yeah, please. Sure. So the first time this was presented, this had been reviewed by legal counsel. And what Barry Elsner has been doing is kind of working through some of our foundational documents saying, hey, these things are kind of outdated. We can help you bring these up to standard, give you more direction, notice these gaps. And I think we've all noticed a few of them with our council rules. Sometimes there's not enough direction or you want there to be more direction. So the first time we came, we kind of brought you the first draft from them. There wasn't a whole lot of specificity about where we were at with that. And there was a pretty big question about how do we handle ties? And I felt like we needed to come back and kind of work through it like we normally do. You know, council likes to be very hands-on with these, and I feel like this is one of those areas that was appropriate. So we're back here with a little more detail, able to do a little bit more about why things are the way they are if you want to do that. And I had a nice long conversation with Jeanette. Thank you for that. Where we talked through quite a lot, and so I imagine that some of you will have similar points. So the first question was about ties. I provided a spreadsheet with various ways ties are broken through city councils. I think this one is kind of nominal. We do have a way to do that. It's just not written. It's through Robert's rules. Essentially, there's a tie, the motion fails, and you can reopen it with another vote. That's kind of how it works right now.
Remind us where that is again, what section you're talking about.
Yeah, so if you go into the rules,
Was it in this packet?
it is in the packet. Page 18, section F, tie vote shall indicate a denial of the proposal.
I do remember reading it.
We recommend removing the part where it says if the matter's been appealed from a lower city body or commission, it shall render the body's decision approved. Ultimately, council is the authority for these things. And so there are certain, this is something maybe I should talk with Lori about with the land use process, but that would be the one area where you'd have a board or committee right now with an official action being approved up. And I just wasn't sure if it was appropriate to have their decision stand as the final decision on a land use action. See it both ways, and you can kind of look at that chart and see it. So we remove that and just say it's a denial. There are reopeners. There's a lot of ways to do that. It's built in already.
So my understanding then, if it's a land use and we're making a decision and it's 3-3, does it fail? Is it a no?
Would fail. And I think that does put the eye back on council, right? As the final arbiters on something like that. you are the final say. And I personally think that's appropriate. I think that a lot of cities are recognizing that is the appropriate way to go, instead of having an appointed commission who aren't voted in be the final decision on a land use action. That's why I think we're seeing more of these just be a tie as a failure. Kind of put that back on. Again, that might not be appropriate for you as a body. That's okay.
Well, and I would think the theory would be too that more discussion needs to take place if there is a tie too, and then another vote would occur is what I would think the proper course of action would be with that.
Yeah, and then we can talking about multiple kind of courses of ties. So like a tie for a regular item would be fails for land use. Maybe it needs to go back for a vote until a successful or a failed vote rather than a tie. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
I'm sorry, say that last
So
part.
for land use specifically, you were hoping that it wouldn't end in a tie, that kind of we would have a system that would force a yay or a nay vote ultimately.
I'm just talking about anything that results in
Anything.
a tie. It would probably just deserve more discussion, and hopefully that would break the tie.
If someone said, can I discuss more and then let's revote, and if it changes at that time, then it changes. But like on a decision such as city council, you don't end in a tie and fail. There are rules about revoting and discussing and revoting,
Appointment.
like for an appointment.
Yeah, and Susan has that, and I think that's just because that seat kind of has to be.
Right.
Whereas some of these issues that we're dealing with, they're not necessarily like, you don't have to make them. You can make a no vote, and that's the same as a tie vote. That's denial, not legally required. I'll look into that system that requires more voting until a successful or failure.
Well, I would think, sorry, Jeanette, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think it does say that if it's a tie, any pertaining, tie that you can bring that up.
You can.
At the same, at that.
You can bring it back, yeah. Yeah, I thought what I was hearing was that it was more of a system that requires more.
No, I mean, I think council has the luxury of deciding what they want to do to include withdrawing the topic completely.
Kind of leave it as it is, where the choice can be made to reopen it if you choose to or not. Okay, second item would be the agendas. And Jeanette and I talked about this, and I actually had another comment from another counselor about this, specifically about kind of how the agendas are decided, why they're kind of locked, as it were. And some of this is because of state law. So currently our code says that when you have an agenda item fixed on the agenda, you can do that. You can add items up to a week before. And the reason is for public notice requirements. So the theory is that when you release an agenda, you're notifying the public of action that might happen, and that's required. And so the reason that the code currently says it's locked a week ahead of time is that on Tuesdays, the packets are finalized and sent out and kind of they're done. And it's really hard to adjust them. And so that week gives Susan and staff time to accommodate for that. If we were adding agenda items up until the meeting, number one, you might have a situation where the public isn't duly notified of something that could be a decision that could be of import. They wouldn't have the opportunity to participate. That portion is set by law. The other thing is that's kind of our system with how we generate packets, the time necessary to make sure they get out, how that's built into the schedules. Does anybody have any questions or more clarification they would like?
Interesting, because when I had a dialogue about this long ago, agenda could come back and share with me that actually there is no set, that we don't have to.
Correct.
So am I hearing you correctly in that there's,
I can explain, because you're right, there is a caveat. So the state does not require anything. They have a very broad phrase. It's something like duly noticed. Now the practice has been no less than 3 days. So you could do that. You could do that. I think that our code right now says 7. I think we could shorten it to 3. I think that that would be something that might be a substantial change for the reporter and how those packets are done. That said, I think if we went any less than 3, so 72 hours, there would be a couple logistical challenges. One, we'd be talking about Saturday or Sunday, which doesn't work for staff for sure. And two, I think that the general standard, the lowest standard that has been in practice is 3. And so it would make a hard fight for us to justify anything less than that, except for an emergency or a special situation. So it is about notice. So if you wanted to go to 3, you could do that. But I would definitely want to see how that would impact Susan's work. I don't really understand as well as she does how that works. Make sure she has the time needed.
So I totally agree that we should be adhering to the noticing requirements, 7 days. I think where I start to take some exception agenda items is that I understand that this is a moment in time that we set the agenda. But the world is still going, and
Mm.
there may be things that occur that we need to, as a council, respond to. So I want to make sure that we're going to abide by Robert's Rules of Order, which means we can, at the beginning of the session, if we need to add, we can make a motion to add an item or delete an item off the agenda. That's standing Robert Rules of Order. I would expect that we're able to do that because I don't want us to be locked a week in advance and something occur that requires our attention. It's like, nope, sorry, you've got to push that to 2 weeks, 3 weeks later. How can we as council remain relevant and address the issues that need to be addressed?
I think that's a great question. I think that I would like a advice from legal on the answer. And a couple things come to mind. Again, one, if it's a council action, the state preempts us and they say that we have to give due notice. So unless we can prove criticality, i.e. something is going to happen egregious and we have to decide tonight, I think we'd have a hard time passing that standard. That said, there might be some wiggle room for items that are discussion points versus an item that's official action. Because that's where that comes in is when you're taking action as a council, the public has to know, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? So that's that kind of gray area. And we can find some room there. I think the other portion of that would be more practical for staff. So if it was something where you wanted staff information or a staff report, we found out on a Friday, we might not be able to generate that fast enough. Typically staff works at least a week or 2 ahead. So right now, this has been done a week ago. We're already on to 2 weeks, 4 weeks down the road. So maybe there's some room to think about that. I can certainly look into it, see what we can do. Because you're right, there are things that could be discussed that might be pertinent and not require action. Is that kind of more what you're talking about?
I think that's definitely the line is understand that if we have to take an action, notice. That I understand. I think discussion items, though, if there are things that we discuss, we should be following them. Be able to add those to the agenda day of so that we can begin that dialogue, whatever it may be.
I would be concerned though, if I didn't have enough time to learn or study and ask questions about it beforehand. And if we put it 2 days before, I like to see it a week before so I can ask questions, get more educated on it. But you're right, we're not making a decision. The decision might be, let's look at this further.
You might not even need staff time at that point.
Yeah, and then also I was thinking too, if there was an event and somebody wanted to ask you, can I please come and speak real quick about the Chamber of Commerce? I have a big event. Well, we'd maybe ask them in public comment, come, if you could do it there, but maybe we can add something last minute or 2 or 3 days early when it's only a discussion topic or informational. Somebody wants to provide us some information that's very prudent to that moment in time and that can't wait for 2 weeks.
If I may offer my opinion here, so I see it on governing bodies agendas all the time, where at the very top, right before public comment, they have additions to agenda. I think that we need to have that flexibility in case something does come up, it's a pressing issue, but I think there needs to be a criteria for what can be added because of the notice criteria. And I think it's only some things that are required to be noticed by law, not all things. And so I think having a criteria for when it's appropriate to add things to the agenda because they just came up and they're time sensitive. That is a criteria right in itself.
And I think that we might find some guidance under the special meeting emergency clauses. I think that I would imagine agenda could hold and host a regular agenda, but also a special meeting item or an emergency item. I don't know that
I
we,
think the League of Oregon Cities guide has a lot of information on this too.
The way, if we come to a meeting and a councilman wants to add something to that meeting because it's not on the agenda, the way I've always seen it is the person would ask the council to approve it. Then the council would vote to allow that item on the agenda or not. Now, if it takes action, like firm action, then you may discuss it, I think, and then you may have to come back at a more formal meeting after some notice at certain issues.
Yeah,
But
Larry,
many times you can just add it to the agenda and then have it.
I agree with what you're saying. My whole issue with this is putting something in writing that we can't do that or that conflicts with being able to do that. So I just want to make sure that the language that's added allows us the ability to do that.
I understand.
Yeah, and I do believe that this is your agenda and have input on it and say just as much as I or the city manager does. Yes, Counselor. Jagel.
Well, I guess, thank you, Isaac, for viewing some of this. And I agree. I don't think we're going to be able to cover everything 15 minutes. I think this is a long discussion. I think it has to come back. But along this topic, in that same section, on section B, and you and I discussed it, I think that there's what it sounds like the city manager may remove any items and after a conversation, you and I, because I think I want to propose a change that maybe it should be a notice to either the mayor or some type. I know it's is like under, is it last minute? Right, it could be right before the meeting. And you gave me different examples of scenarios of why that may be. And I'm not sure if anybody in the council would like to hear those, but I think that at least the mayor should know so we wouldn't, for the council, so we wouldn't just come blind. Oh, this item's not in the agenda and why. So I just want to propose that we do add in that some kind of notification to the council or mayor would be.
So I actually have some as well. So I would need to hear the scenarios because I do have concern over the verbiage. I know it says may, but remove items off the consent agenda, any old items, resolution, ordinance, reading. I kind of need to understand what that is in context.
Yeah, absolutely,
Um,
absolutely. And this is kind of what I thought we were going to get into with this item. I mean, this goes to the very heart of how we conduct business. And so I expect this to be the case. Quite a few more items than we're going to get to tonight.
Yeah, okay.
So there's a lot of reasons that something might need to be removed, and they are all going to be fairly impactful. So you could have a legal reason. Maybe the law changed, and what we're going to present is no longer legal, right? You don't have time to adjust it. Need more time. You could have extreme situations. Maybe you find your staff member has been negligent and did not do their due diligence and it slid. We would never want to bring that to you. It could be as simple as, maybe public sentiment has changed about an agenda item and we think it's going to take an hour or two. And there's some other things we can slide that are not as critical. Could be maybe there needs to be some more thought work. Maybe some manager says, look, we're bringing this to them. They deserve a fully fleshed out thing. I'm not sure it's there yet. Again, I think we want to hold. I think some of this, the way this is constructed, where they may remove it, it'll be potentially noticed. The mayor will read it out. This item has been removed. That allows in here for any counselor to call the issue basically and say, hey, let's talk about this. Why was it removed? Call the city manager, make them publicly respond. Why did you remove this? For you to decide. And if it's not, then you can put it back. And there's a lower bar. So we suggested on here that bar to put it back on was 3. That could be lower. It could be 1 council member could say, look, we want this item back on. We are the council. Any one of us can put something the city manager takes off back on. But that's kind of that check and balance on that, where you're right, that is a council power. It's not a power of staff, right? We do what you tell us to do. And this is a way to kind of strike the balance. And it's hard because I think also we wouldn't want to say we did have an agenda item that wasn't ready. We would never want to put half edited or not really ready for publication item out there because sometimes, the data controls perception and making sure we have our data right is really important. So it is a fine line. I mean, I think that if we looked, we'd find councils on both sides, some that say no, the city manager can never take something off. or to take something off, they have to get a full vote, majority vote.
Before you speak, you're cutting in and out a little, I understand. So, I mean, does it sound better if it says the city manager may request an item be removed from the agenda, and then we have to vote on it being removed?
We can do that too. I mean, again. we
And then
can
he'll have to
instruct this.
explain why. And if he knows it 2 or 3 days ahead, he could email everybody saying, I'm gonna ask this be removed. We don't have the information we need, or this changed. But would you rather us have to vote on it and remove it as we approve the agenda, or he can remove it and then we have to ask, to put it back on?
I think it's all how much oversight and control council wants.
That's how you worded it the first.
Request for removal.
The manager may request any item be removed.
That would be are you envisioning that like a formal request that is at a council meeting prior at the agenda item when we approve it? The request would be talked about then.
What would be what's the best practice?
I mean, I don't know what that is because I haven't really looked into this. I think that the best practice on this one is however you choose to construct it. This is a construction of council for how much control and oversight you want and how much you're willing to let go. One of the things that Councilor Santiago and I talked about was, city managers change, and there's always a little bit of uncertainty. You're not sure how this person works. Maybe you want to make sure council holds that control because it is pretty quick. Even if this is a public item, city managers requested we remove agenda item 5. Does anybody have any problems with that? No. On yes. Hey, why did you do that? It should be fairly routine and quick to go through these things. It shouldn't be
Like at the time of the agenda, we're approving the agenda and he's asking we remove them, and then we'll approve the agenda, adopted or amended agenda.
that just puts a little more control in your hands. I think that's what I've seen lots of councils prefer that. I mean, you are one's accountable.
And him or us can remove something off the consent agenda if we'd rather discuss it. You're we. But we can remove it off the council on the work consent agenda and put it on the agenda to discuss it in depth.
And I might mention that is something that occurs quite often. Staff, as we prepare the agenda, well, they go, that's no big deal. And so put it under the consent. But it's very often the council would say, no, we want to discuss that further. You simply make a motion to take it off that. I think one person can do that, I believe. Can just say, hey, I want to discuss that, and it comes off the consent.
So it just moves into the old business or new business, depending on what it's. So we have about 6 minutes left, realistically. Kind of want to get a temperature. Do you think we need to bring this back as a group? Do we need to bring this back for more work session time? I feel like we barely scratched this, but it's your call.
My preference would be that you bring it back.
Would you like an hour so we can kind of run through this logically? Right. In the interim, if you could review, if you do have a chance, send me questions. I can start getting some alignments, making some more edits, taking the comments back, and I can also report those back to the group when we get back together. Kind of pull out the discussion topics that I think hearing and make sure we're all in alignment.
And I do approve the agenda as I get them, a few of them months in advance with their stuff on them, but definitely each week ahead of time, we look at it and I approve it with Susan before we make it official. So.
Our work sessions are pretty tight between now and the end of the fiscal year. They're pretty much all eaten up. So we might be looking at July. See if we can get some more time. Maybe there's some agenda time in a meeting we can pull. But again, this is as much as like these things are red tape and administrative, they are important. I think they're really important. And there's nothing like time sensitive about this. We're not breaking laws. We're not, business is normal until we change this.
And if we have to chunk it out as well
We can do.
We have,
to get after it, but yes, we'll send you our notes, and then that way you can start to consolidate, and then that way you're in a better position.
we have added work session items in our regular session too. So if we have some really lightweight set meetings, we can add it to the end of a meeting as well. Even if it's a 45 minutes or where we think it would fit, we can add it.
Does anybody have anything really pressing that they want me to hear? Before
Oh, the one thing I did have on there was public comment. We had mentioned it. We have public comment at the beginning. I like to keep it the same where people can talk about items not on the agenda. But then items that are on the agenda, I was asking, how do we like to talk about them? If we feel that there's gonna be comments, can we open up another comment section before the agenda item or after, depending on the meeting? But here, I mean, you look at it, it says items, what number? Public comments on the agenda is number 5, other than comments for public hearings. So I was thinking of removing 5. We're always, 11 is gonna be up high, public comments on, not on the agenda, but public comments on items. Instead of having it up there where it might be 45 minutes before we talk about the item, it's gonna be wherever the agenda item is.
I see.
So
I
What
see.
you're saying is, so not on the agenda at the top of the meeting. Comments on the agenda, wait until we get to the agenda item. I think it would probably be beneficial to be able to either have it at the top of when that agenda item comes, and then we get into the conversation, or make a decision that they come after.
Yes.
So my preference would be that we give them the option to comment at the beginning of the meeting when we do regular public comment. But to me, when I go to public meetings, I like to hear the discussion from the governing members and then comment based on what I hear, so I'm making an educated comment. So I would prefer that they are given the luxury or the option to comment at the beginning of the meeting, but then if they choose, they can hear discussion and then they can comment after, right,
Okay.
of that topic.
Yeah, they won't have public comment twice.
Right, correct.
But yeah, if they wait till the item, then it might be more, we can maybe answer their questions a little more within our discussion.
A little more like a land use hearing.
But I don't know if we put something in there, because it's gonna follow the agenda item.
I
But
mean, I can wordsmith it. I think for this opportunity is to flush some of this out where we just have a little bit of lack of clarity. We've kind of been doing things this way, but then whenever we come to a hot topic agenda item, we don't really have guidance about how do we do this. And so this time is designed to help you and future councils and future staff members understand how we all do this.
I mean, I give public comment all the time and it's really hard to give public comment not knowing what the board members and,
We're gonna say.
I mean, yeah, because I could be giving public comment that's not even relevant anymore.
it does say council may adopt a simple majority vote, a longer public comment period, and different limitations on speakers' time in a meeting by meeting basis. So if we feel that we get to an agenda later on that is gonna, we can say, we're gonna play by the same rules. We'll open up to another 30-minute comments with 5-minute max. You know, we can,
That's
Have that
exactly why I
flexibility.
wrote that in there, was to give flexibility. Sounds like there's a little more wish for specificity, and I can most certainly do that. Probably leave that other phrase in there to allow that flexibility as well, because I do know occasionally in meetings, things need to change. Again, when we come back, I'll have both options in there. You can go through it, decide which one's appropriate.
I just want to, I know we talked about this and I'm not sure how the rest of the council feels, but on the first section, the meetings adjourned, I would like it to say no longer than 10 PM. Standard pieces that we need to, but,
we'll shoot for 9 PM with no longer than 10 instead of asking for a motion.
And that's that again, the important discussion point.
Believe me,
Going
I
on that
won't
one
say,
for
oh, I
10
get till
minutes.
10, I'm gonna slow it down. I got till 10. No, we'll definitely try to get out of here before 9.
I can think of a couple reasons that you might.
But that's the other reason I'm trying to set meetings that will get us out by 9. If we know we can be here 10, oh, I can add a few more items. No, set the agenda for items we think will put us close to 9 when possible. Okay? All right,
Otherwise,
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Session's adjourned.